Hi folks, welcome to RJA Impact. Today we're going to be talking about week 14 in the Holmes Theranos trial. You can search this channel for previous week's updates and also for a more detailed video on the background to Theranos and Holmes' journey to the point at which this trial commenced. Please don't forget to like this video if you do, and subscribe to the channel, and if you hit the notification button you won't miss out on any future videos or updates. As a reminder, Elizabeth Holmes is in court accused of multiple instances of fraud against doctors, patients and investors in connection with her role as CEO of Theranos. This is week 14 of that trial, and specifically it's the second part of the week as we move to the prosecution's cross-examination of Elizabeth Holmes.
What do you think's going on here?
This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
And we'll get straight into the trial today. Well, there was no delay in getting started. Holmes took the stand on Tuesday morning, and the prosecution did not hesitate to get to it either. They immediately hit the ground running by raising Carrie Rue's 2015 article and Holmes' aggressive response. Did she try to control Carrie Rue's attempt to get into a wellness centre? I don't remember, she said. She was then shown text messages from Balwani on the possible test. I still do not remember. Holmes had texted to Balwani what appears to be a jibe at his heritage. Carrie Rue is French and proud of it, proud cynic. She doesn't remember this either. You wanted to get ahead of it, didn't you? Robert Leach for the prosecution asked, talking about Carrie Rue. Holmes refused to answer, responding something about trade secrets. Leach then repeated the question. There were some texts written between Balwani and Holmes about who was leaking to Carrie Rue. Down to 5 people. We'll nail this motherfucker, Balwani texts. A little later he texts, it's Tyler, Erica and Adam. Leach asks why she didn't respond with, who is Erica? Or why is he talking to her? Leach made this point because we heard when the defence were questioning Elizabeth, she'd said she didn't know about Erica Chung's concerns. Holmes said she didn't think Erica was right about the issues she was raising, even though Leach pointed out she raised the same issues as the CMS report. Holmes said she'd asked Daniel Young to look into it. No, she didn't retaliate against Chung, she said, but she did hire David Boyce to issue a subpoena. In short, the letter sent to Young was a cease and desist letter, else we'll consider all remedies including filing suit against you. Now it did take some questioning, but Holmes eventually admitted to knowing about the letter. What about hiring the private investigation firms? Holmes does not have much of a memory on this. When Leach shows her evidence of paying $150,000 to 2 PI firms, Holmes can only respond with, I think I mishandled the entire process of the Wall Street Journal reporting. We then moved on to Tyler and George Schultz. Now, Holmes had had a one-to-one with George pretty much every week. Well, we know that Tyler had raised issues inside Theranos and was in the process of addressing them with Daniel Young. Balwani had said in a text that Tyler was spending too much time with Daniel. After one exchange of emails with Balwani, Tyler says to him, a significant portion of our data is just noise, and this is in respect of a syphilis test. In other words, or in my words anyway, useless. In another email, was our test really the most accurate and precise test on the market? Tyler had asked Young. Young was surprised at this and asked Tyler where he got the information from. Well, Tyler does the sensible thing, a quick Google, and finds plenty of articles saying exactly that. For example, the Wall Street Journal Rallo piece. Tyler suggested to Holmes in an email that they correct the articles to maintain Theranos' claimed vision of being open and transparent about their testing. Oh dear, Balwani saw the email and wrote back to Tyler, had this email come from anyone else in the company, I would have already held them accountable for this arrogant and patronising tone. Holmes had actually seen an earlier draft of this email and said to Balwani it should be stronger. After this and a few other emails, Tyler had handed in his notice. Holmes was asked, Theranos voided all its vitamin D tests. Was Tyler Schultz right about the problems? I don't think the concerns he raised were correct, Holmes replied. You chose not to listen to him. No, you decided to retaliate. No, but didn't you hire David Boyes to threaten a lawsuit? Yes, and it wouldn't surprise me if Schultz got a similar letter. Boyes Schiller had ambushed Tyler at George's house. This isn't my memory of it, Holmes said. Now George Schultz had called Elizabeth in the evening after the Boyes Schiller ambush, and he wanted to know what Tyler had done. He was angry, Holmes admitted, and she also admitted she knows Tyler was asked to sign documents in the ambush. You tried to intimidate Carreyrou? I don't think so. But Boyes was sent to threaten litigation. He'd met people at the Wall Street Journal. I couldn't say more strongly the way that we handled the Wall Street Journal process was a disaster. We totally messed it up, Holmes said. Didn't you go to the owner of the Wall Street Journal to get the story quashed? Yes. Holmes had actually approached Rupert Murdoch directly to try to get the story quashed. Now, we know that that was ultimately unsuccessful. It was part of our efforts to keep our trade secrets from being published, Holmes said. I promise you we'll get to the trade secrets later. Please answer the question, Leach said. And we got to the Mad Money appearance, where extracts from that video were actually shown to the court.
How many tests can your device, Edison, do? The Wall Street Journal says it can only do 15 out of 240.
Yeah, so we had communicated to the Wall Street Journal that we have submitted over 130 pre-submissions to FDA with tests running on our proprietary devices and have been taking those through the FDA submission process. Every test that we offer in our laboratory can run on our proprietary devices. We bring tests up on our proprietary devices based on the frequency with which they're run. So at any given point in time, we're running the tests that are most commonly ordered. But we've also done a lot of work as part of this commitment that we've made, and it's been very controversial that we've actually become the first company advocating for FDA regulation of lab-developed tests. And as part of that, we have said that we think that every lab-developed test really should go through the FDA submission process, and so we've been consistent with it. And in fact, we even just recently took our nanotainers through the FDA clearance process and sent submissions in for those. And as part of that process, we're not even using our nanotainers except for FDA cleared assays, so that every single thing that runs on our platform is getting to the point that it's going to be FDA cleared.
Now, it came a little bit later on, but it was confirmed that the Edison 3.5 was the only analyzer ever to be used in labs. It was limited to immune assays and could only do 12 tests. Now, Jim Cramer didn't get this information when he asked about it. Now, personally, the response Holmes gave here is confusing to me as well, and I'm not the only one. The board member Kirk Kovacevic had sent a note to Holmes after the Mad Money appearance. I'm still confused. How many of our customer submissions are being tested on lab equipment versus Edison? And we didn't see a direct response to that. On Balwani, you could fire him at any time? Yes. The buck stops with you. Is that fair? I felt that. Now, there were some exchanges on all the roles in the company that Holmes could hire and fire, and also the external firms like the legal firms, and she agreed that she could hire and fire them all. We then talked about the SEC testimony in 2017, but just before that we saw her salaries. In 2010, 11, 12 and 13 she was paid $200,000. In 2014 she was paid $360,000, and in 2015 she was paid just under $400,000. We also heard that at its peak Theranos could do 58 assays, but these were on modified third-party machines. In the whole of the Arizona lab there was no Theranos tech, and the majority of the testing was done there. Holmes agreed with this. So I think what we've established here at least is that Holmes was the CEO, she was paid accordingly, and she pretty much knew what was going on inside the company. And then we got to the Balwani relationship. It was loving and not so loving, Holmes was asked. Yes, she replied. We then heard Holmes reading out some of the text between her and Balwani. Balwani to Holmes. Love you. I prayed from the bottom of my heart for you. I have never prayed with this intensity in my life for anything and anyone. You will shine. Was just thinking about you and meditating on my tigress. Holmes to Balwani. It is us together. My nirvana. Balwani to Holmes. You are God's tigress and warrior. You are extraordinary. Holmes to Balwani. Coming from my tiger means the whole universe to me. I love you. Balwani to Holmes. Missing you, this business cannot be built by you or I alone. That's why the universe brought us together. No one but you and I can build this business. There were several other sappy texts read out by Holmes. Then we had Balwani to Holmes. Worried about your all finger sticks on our technology comment. Holmes to Balwani. Would it be okay if I saw Jesse and Laura separately in the AM tomorrow? Home at latest 10:15 AM. Is this Balwani being loving? Home was asked. I think it's me asking permission to see my friends. I often try to ask him if it would be okay if I could see a friend before going to the office or going to a work meeting, said Holmes. I don't get this personally. It's bizarre. Why would Leach bring up this exchange when it appears to play into the hands of the abuse defence? I don't know. Now Holmes is crying again on the stand as she reads some more texts out. How many times does the word love appear in the text? I don't know. Would you be surprised to find it is 594 times? No, it doesn't surprise Holmes. Holmes then testified that the romance started to die when she realised Balwani wasn't who she thought he was. No way could I save our company if he was there, and that was it. Well, this is in respect of the damning CMS report that Holmes is blaming on Balwani. Now, in the SEC deposition from a couple of years ago, she never mentioned this as a reason for ending their relationship, and she says she doesn't remember. We saw one comment from Balwani. Ron commented there is too much hype around Theranos and you, and I'm worried about overexposure without solid substance, which is lacking right now. He's not hiding his view? Leach asked. No, Holmes responded. We saw a number of other texts between Balwani and Holmes about PR strategy, pricing strategy, legal approaches, essentially working together on things, etc., etc. And the point being made here is that Balwani and Holmes did have a day-to-day working relationship. We see in their texts where they agree and disagree with each other, but in a collaborative way to decide on an approach. The FDA surprise inspection. We saw texts back and forth between Holmes and Balwani about what the FDA was telling them, and the point being made by Leach and agreed by Holmes is that there wasn't anything hidden from him and he didn't hide anything from her. You just pushed him out, didn't you? I asked him to leave, yes, Holmes responded, and there were areas where Balwani deferred to you. Holmes agreed to this. Would one of those areas be Safeway? Leach asked. It's possible, Holmes responded. We also saw from the SEC testimony that Balwani was the decision maker on Walgreens, and Holmes was the decision maker on Safeway and military dealings. Balwani deferred on all marketing matters, and there are some texts that support this. We heard that Balwani and Holmes had set up a company to purchase the house that they wanted to buy, and it was a 50-50 arrangement. We saw some images of the house, which looks pretty nice in my opinion. Now, what the prosecution is trying to do is set up the motivation for Holmes to keep the company going while its technology failed. Essentially to maintain her lifestyle. They intended to introduce more of her luxurious lifestyle in due course, as well as her covetousness for fame and attention. However, the extent of this was limited by Judge de Villa. And on to marketing, where the prosecution are still trying to establish that Holmes knew a lot about issues within the company. We saw an email from Kate Beardsley, who was a lawyer hired to review marketing materials and looked specifically at their website. I haven't quite worked my way through the whole website, but I'm worried, she wrote. For example, you say better without saying better than what? You must be able to substantiate these claims. There are lots of changes to the website suggested. But only 3 months later we saw materials sent to the investor Grossman stating Theranos provides the highest levels of oversight, automation and standardization. This is in direct contradiction of the lawyer's advice. Also we saw the phrase highest levels of accuracy and less than 10% coefficient of variation in vitamin D, and this was the same test that Tyler Schultz wrote about. There was proficiency testing and audits mentioned in the investor materials as well, but these were all for non-Theranos equipment and were FDA approved machines. Holmes says that she remembers sharing the proficiency testing in respect of these machines and doesn't remember talking about the modified machines with any investors. Other materials, like for PFM, were saying things like highest levels of accuracy, Theranos runs any tests available, etc., etc. Did Daniel Young go to any of the investor meetings? I don't think so. He wasn't there for PFM, RDV, BDT, Murdoch, the DeVos family? Holmes was asked. He wasn't there for any of those meetings, she said. She said she told the board that Theranos had an invention for modifying standard tests. But we have your memory for that point. It's not something in the minute, Leach asked. Now, Mattis had said in earlier testimony that he was unaware of third-party devices. So there's another point of contradiction in Holmes' testimony. The big Pharma logos. Well, Holmes had already said that she'd applied them to the Theranos documents. Do you agree that this is not an independent due diligence report? I thought it was. Do you think so today? I still think it was, Holmes said. We heard some more alterations that didn't come up on direct examination. The words, prepared for Dr. Aidan Power, are on the Pfizer one. Did Holmes delete them? I think so, she said. If they were on it, it would make it easier for a reader to know that the report had been prepared by Theranos. Yes, Holmes replied. We saw a number of emails between Pfizer and Shane Webber of Pfizer. Nowhere it says that Pfizer agrees with the memo or comprehensively validates the tech. Holmes is decidedly uncomfortable going through this material. And the Schering-Plough document. Holmes put the logo on it and says that she didn't think she told Walgreens she put the logo on it. Other stuff was actually added, including Schering Corporation, Schering-Plough Research Institute, Assay Development Report, and these were all added by Holmes and not mentioned in the direct defence testimony. Oh, and the conclusions had been changed too. In fact, the conclusions were different between the two versions provided to Schering-Plough and Walgreens. In fact, Schering-Plough hadn't even responded to the original report, and it was highly likely that they never saw the version sent to Walgreens. Did you add those words? I think so, Holmes said. But you didn't testify to that on direct examination. I don't think so, she said. Are these changes something you wished you'd done differently? I think this was accurately reflecting the data in the document, Holmes said. Another document was looked at. This was the GlaxoSmithKline memo, which came via an email. Miraculously, a logo had appeared on it by the time it got to Walgreens. There were no dates on it either. Holmes doesn't know if she deleted the dates. Well, personally, I could make a good guess as to who did delete the dates. One comment, finger prick blood draw procedure was difficult, was not included in the Walgreens document. Holmes doesn't know who at Theranos made that change. And as another aside here, I think I can guess who did. Did Holmes ever tell anyone that Theranos could not have the slightest negative comment going to partners? She doesn't think so. Leach then looked at the contract with Pfizer, and this prohibits using or authorising others to use names, symbols or marks which would knowingly constitute or express implied endorsement without prior written approval. Would Holmes have been angry if someone used Theranos logo without consent? Some partners presented their work at conferences, she said. You didn't look at the contract and make sure that it was okay to do that? Leach asked. I did not, said Holmes. We saw some extracts of some financials, and I think what the prosecution were trying to do here is create some incentive of a kind of burning urgency to collect money from investors, because the focus was on how tight cash was at some point of the company's existence. We saw that they were almost out of money in September 2013 due to their cash burn rate, and Holmes said she never thought of it like that. And they did get some stock option proceeds of $23 million a week later than that. Now, this wrapped up Holmes' testimony for this week, and we'll see her back on the stand on Tuesday next week. So as usual, I'll try to condense things down to the bare essentials. Holmes' cross-examination in a nutshell. Carrie Rue's Wall Street Journal articles. We heard how Holmes tried to manage the situation. For example, Carrie Rue's visit to a wellness centre. Holmes doesn't remember a lot about the management of this situation. We heard a jibe at Carrie Rue's French heritage, going after the whistleblowers. Erica Chung. Now, Holmes had hired lawyers to issue subpoenas against Erica. She also hired PIs, although doesn't remember doing that. And she said she mismanaged the whole situation in respect of the Carreyrou and the whistleblowers, George and Tyler Schultz. Now, Tyler had raised issues and was working with Daniel Young on them. We saw Balwani's email, which was very strong to Tyler, and Holmes had looked at that and said it should be stronger still. Now, the vitamin D tests that were voided, Tyler was actually right. And the prosecution said that Holmes didn't listen to Tyler, which she disagreed with. She also hired lawyers to go after Tyler, and they ambushed him at George's house and issued him with cease and desist letters. She also went to Murdoch to actually manage the fallout in respect of Tyler and Carreyrou's Wall Street Journal articles. Mad Money. We saw Holmes' appearance on Mad Money and also her evasive answers about what Theranos proprietary machines could actually do. Even the board was confused after her appearance as to what their own machines could do. Holmes as CEO. Yes, she could fire people at will, including Balwani. Her salary reflected that of a CEO, and she did know about details in the company. And one specific piece of information we heard about there was in respect of the Arizona lab, where there was no Theranos tech, but most of Theranos testing was done there. The Balwani relationship. Lots and lots of lovey-dovey texts. We saw a text where Holmes was seemingly asking Balwani for permission to meet her friends. This seemed a little bit odd for the prosecution to bring up. We heard their relationship ended after the CMS audit, and lots of texts were referred to which showed that they did have an honest and open working relationship. Submissions to investors. We saw a lawyer review of the Theranos website where words like better and phrases like highest levels of accuracy were criticised, and the lawyer had advised them to be removed. However, we then saw the same wordings in materials that were sent to investors only a few months after the legal review. We know that Holmes had already admitted adding the logos, however, there were more changes identified by the prosecution that were not disclosed under the defence questioning. Even the conclusions on the reports themselves were changed, and one specific sentence that was taken out was a critical one relating to the Theranos ubiquitous finger prick test. And very quickly at the very end of the day, we saw a quick review of some financials where the cash burn was indicating the company would run out of money, and investor monies being received just in time to prevent that. Well, that's it for me for this week, and a quick reminder, the court will resume next Tuesday and prosecution cross-examination of Holmes will recommence. Bye for now.